All right, we're going to jump right into it. For those of you who were not able to attend last week's session, which was Intro to MS Word, I will include the link so you can watch that video if you so choose. Some people have asked, are there prerequisites for this class? And I want to say no, simply because we all are on a different journey within Microsoft Word. Some are very advanced and only want the most advanced type of information. However, I do highly encourage you, if you are self-taught in Word, that you take a very systematic approach to your learning, because many of us miss things along the way, because what we have to do is what is required of us for the job, and that's not always the easiest way. So hopefully I can give you some tips and tricks today along with some base knowledge. So first off, I'm going to explain what intermediate means. You could be learning in Word your entire career. It does change, but also it's a huge program. So intermediate does not mean the middle of what there is to know, nor does advanced mean all there is to know. What intermediate means is within the standard workplace requirements of what you're going to use day in, day out. This is the second step. And the advanced requirements will be what I have found through questioning hundreds of employers throughout the years of what is required when you say MS Word and Excel are requirement. What skills are they looking for? And that's what I base this off of. So we're going to hit some of the intermediate skills today. So what we're going to be covering to accomplish that is we're going to be talking a lot about formats. Last week or 2 weeks ago was just about entering information. Now we're going to format that pre-existing information. So we're going to talk about 4 different things. We're going to be talking about first, character formats, which are formats applied to each individual character, or it could be applied to the whole document. We'll talk about specific paragraph formats, and these are things that apply to everything between 2 enters. That's what Word defines a paragraph as. Everything before you hit enter is a paragraph. Once you hit enter, you get a new paragraph, and there are formats specifically aligned to that definition. We'll also talk about something called section formats. I used to call these document-wide formats. A better definition is section formats. And these can apply to your entire document, or you can kind of chop that document up into various sections and apply some pretty neat formats. And that's where the intermediate comes in. And then we'll also talk about styles, which are collected formats. It's on the Home tab of the ribbon. You've always seen it. Many people have used it. I'm going to show you how to use it most effectively. So before we get started with formats, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about steps to formatting text, what you need to do. There's 2 ways of doing this. First is you can apply the format. Let's just say something simple like bold. I could click on B and I go on the font grouping of the Home tab, and then I could start typing and everything would be in bold. The way many of us format, myself included, is we work with text that's already there. So in order to apply any of the formats I'm going to be talking about today, you need to tell the computer where to do it. In many cases, that involves selecting that text. And I'll walk through some live demonstrations of the various different ways to do that. We're also going to leave time every 4 or 5 slides for questions. So once we get through the first section of formatting, we'll pause for that. So first off, we're going to talk about selecting characters. For those of you who were with us a couple weeks ago, I presented this formula. This formula is very handy because what it allows you to do is get some text on your screen. Okay, so I'm going to swap back and forth in between this screen and the PowerPoint screen. Okay, so it looks exactly the same. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be working with the character formats that happen up in this area right here. It's called the font dialog box of the Home tab of the ribbon. Okay, it's right this area right here. So I'm going to zoom in on that. And I'm just going to walk through some of the standard formats and how you would select to do those formats. Now remember, all of these formats can apply to individual characters, okay? So if I select one character, I can make that character very large. Or if I select this character, I can make it red, okay? So to select characters, you just click and drag. Pretty simple. Many of you, most of you have probably done that. If you remember from a couple weeks ago, you can almost double click or triple click. Double clicking selects a word, and triple clicking selects the entire paragraph. One of the other handy options is to go to the left margin and click and drag. And what you're going to do there is you're going to select an entire line at a time. If you want to select the entire document, you can hit Control-A on your keyboard, and that's in that keyboard shortcut document that I sent everybody a couple weeks ago. I'll be sending that along each and every time. I'll be adding a couple of options to it, and you can certainly reference that. Okay, so if you do that for any of these characters of the whole thing, that's what these apply to. So let's just go through a few of them. I'm going to select this paragraph, and we have all these different fonts to use. Now, you can install your own fonts, and that's fun to do. However, I don't recommend you use that for any kind of resume or professional correspondence because the person who gets it on the other end may not have that font available to them. So the standard ones are Calibri, Times New Roman, Tahoma, and Arial. Those are the ones that we use most commonly. I try to stay away from Times New Roman currently simply because it has those additional serifs or embellishments that make it a little harder to read, and it looks a little older than maybe you want it to look to an employer. You can change your size of your font through this option right here. And now it does skip around a bit. It goes from 16 to 18 and 48 to 72. You have the options of any point font you want, and they're called points, by typing it in. You can actually even type in 48.5. And it's going to give you that 0.5, a half a point font. And that's really handy if your resume goes over just a little bit into the next page. You can mess around just a little bit with that. I try not to make my font any smaller than 10, nor any larger than 12. Glory, did you have a couple questions, it looked like?
Yes, I do, Art. Thank you. So first off, Karen was asking me, oh, shoots, no, it went here. Hang on. As an author who self-publishes, do I want pages for Mac or Word, please? Which would be better? I know that uploading to Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, only takes Word.
Yeah, people who have Macs, I'm jealous. They're really cool. They do really awesome things. They work really well. But even if you use Microsoft Word on a Mac, it won't work as well as Microsoft Word on a Windows operating system. Certainly, you're not going to buy a new computer, but yeah, definitely I would not use Pages if you're going to be sending information to a publisher. So what she's talking about there is, what is the most widely accepted format? And that's why I'm teaching Word today. I'd love to teach this class as LibreOffice because that's free for everybody. However, most businesses don't use LibreOffice. They use Microsoft Word. Now, a lot of those skills are transferable, but the final product should be a Word document. And the way you know something is saved as a Word document is at the very end of it, it will say .docx if it has what's called a file extension. But when you save it, just make sure when you save it, on the bottom it says Save As Word Document. Then you should be okay. All right, we're just going to cruise through a few more of these formats, then we'll pause for a couple more questions. Instead of typing in your format, what you can also do is you can use the up and down. And boy, when this became available in newer versions of Word, and by newer, I mean the last 10 years, it was really nice. I used to do this with keyboard shortcuts instead of clicking on the point size here, but now they make it so easy that it's really nice to be able to kind of box in and find out what the most amount of text will fit on a line or something like that. Another option that's very handy for resumes is the change case option, which I'm showing right here. Be aware that when you put everything into uppercase, not only does that sound like yelling to employers or to your friends, it also will not be spell checked. Okay, so if I type something incorrectly in all caps, it thinks it's an acronym. The computer thinks it's an acronym and will not spell check it. So a lot of your titles on your resumes are in capital letters to draw attention. Just make sure you use that change case option to put it in the lowercase so that it will spell check it for you. There's a ton of options here. We're not going to go through all of them because most of them are probably things you already know, but here's a really nice one. Notice that I have a couple different formats. In fact, I'm going to make a couple of different formats here. Okay, so I've got all sorts of different formats here. If you get to a point where you're like, I just want to start over, I don't want to retype, but I want to get rid of all these formats. Instead of backing them out, there's this really nice option called Clear All Formats. It doesn't work perfectly, but it works pretty well. And that can really help you just kind of start over again. All right. If you have a tool that you need to get to that is not on the font grouping, all you need to do is click on this bottom right arrow here. It's called a dialog box launcher. Once you click on that, you will get another set of options. In this case, it's called the font dialog box. And there's everything that was on the original and more. And if you click on the advanced tab, you can do some things that probably you didn't even know existed. Some of these things I've used in the past. Some of them, I understand why someone would use them. I have never had a reason to use them. For example, ligatures. That'll take when you cross an F, if that's two Fs together, it'll connect the two crossed Fs. I have no idea why anyone would want to do that, but that's what ligatures are. Font kerning is about the spacing in between your letters, so you can kind of get an A and a V to tuck in nicely together. It's kind of like spacing, but it has some additional options. Again, when is the average person ever going to use these? Not often. That's why it's not on the initial tab. It's on the advanced tab. However, knowing that these things exist sometimes is really nice, because then you can do a quick Google search on how to use them if you know they're available. All right, character formats are up here in the paragraph grouping. So font grouping was character formats, paragraph formats are paragraph grouping. So I'm going to zoom in on that. After I got that rainbow there. By the way, this is how formats can go wrong. Play around all you like. Don't send something like this professionally. Less is more. You're kind of at risk once you learn all the cool tricks of Microsoft Word or Excel, or especially PowerPoint. At the end of the day, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. So play around, but then use that remove formatting to get rid of all the unnecessary formats. Okay, so we're going to go back to the paragraph grouping, and I've typed in this equals ran 4, 4. And I've put in this information once again. So I'm going to zoom into the paragraph grouping here, and we're going to talk about what we can do with this. First one we're going to talk about is the dialog box. Okay, that's the first thing we're going to talk about, and that is, again, clicking at this bottom right to get a dialog box to pop up to see everything that's available. So again, we have a lot of things. I mentioned this, I think, last time we talked, or last time I did a Word class, and that if when you hit enter in modern versions of Word, it gives an odd spacing, an odd extra spacing after your enter, and that's where you would adjust this. This is one of the places you could adjust this. It's called spacing after. And notice it's set to 8 points. If I were to change that to 0, then I wouldn't get that extra space in between paragraphs. I don't recommend changing a whole lot of things within Word. It's there for a reason, and it works for most situations. If you find situationally, like when you're writing your resume, that some of this stuff doesn't work, go in and change it. But don't make it the default, because what will happen then is that one specific situation is going to have a whole bunch of tools that you're going to have to back out for every other situation. So something to think about. And then we have, again, another more advanced page here, or advanced tab, called the line and page breaks, that has a lot of information together. And this is where you can talk about hyphenating and some really kind of cool things. All right. Any questions before we move on?
Yes. They're wondering, what is the best font to use on your resume?
Calibri is what I would recommend. And that's boring, I know. It's just what is available when you turn it on. It's the default font. I worked for a company that used Tahoma, so that became my font I used. It looks very similar. So Arial, Tahoma, any of those will be what are called sans serif fonts. I mean, they're very clean and crisp, and they look very similar. If I'm going to send a resume out to an employer, though, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, I look on their website and I see what font they use, what their web text is in, and that's probably their default font. So I just use that. And the easy way to do that is you just copy and paste some text from their website or from some document they send out. You paste it into Word, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to tell you what that font is.
Great, Art. I do have one more kind of housekeeping question. Pamela is having troubles with chat. So she says, when I click on chat, all I get are panelists for the chat, not all participants.
Oh, yes. You know why that is, and thank you so much. This is something you're going to have to switch, Glory. When I got kicked off, if you will do this for me, Gloria, if you go up to the top of your screen,
Yes.
and you're going to see event or options.
Yes.
Click
event.
that and go down to assign privileges to.
Okay, so under event, it just says information, start recording, and recorder setting.
Hold on, I will do it.
Okay.
Hold on, everyone. I'm just going to stop sharing for just a moment. And I'll go to event options. And thank you so much, by the way, for bringing that up. Privileges to attendees. There we go. Okay, it should be fixed. Okay. All right, let's jump back in here. So next thing we're going to be talking about is a very common format people have used probably since they started using a computer, but maybe misunderstood it a bit. And that is bullets. Bullets are on the font grouping, or excuse me, the paragraph grouping. But the first thing you need to do is you need to select what you want to apply bullets to. So I have this list of birds here, and I'm going to select it first. And then I'm going to go up here to the paragraph grouping to bullets. It's the top left. And when I turn it on, it just applies bullets. And most people are fine with that. I know people have worked on Word for 20 years, and they've never needed more information than that. The problem is, at some point, you may need to change the bullets or where the bullets align, or the bullets may all of a sudden not align the way you want them to, and you're going to have to delve just a little bit deeper. So first off, I'm going to talk about how you align your bullets, where the setting is. And it used to be someplace different, but the easiest way to do it now is to go up to your ruler, this area right here, and we're going to work with indents to do this. I'm going to zoom in on that. This is called your first line indent, and it's used for many different things. Indents, obviously, but it's also used for bullets. When you are looking at bullets, the first line indent is where your bullet lines up, and your hanging and left indent is where the text lines up. So if I were to drag this to 0, the bullets would move, but this would stay. If I were to drag this over to 1, the bullet would stay, and the text would move over. So that's one way of adjusting kind of how your bullets are set up. So that's, again, your first line indent and your hanging indent. Now, this has two pieces. The difference here is if I grab it by the hanging indent, it'll move, these two will move by themselves, kind of together, but they'll move by themselves. If I grab it by this triangle here, this rectangle, excuse me, that's called the left indent. And what that does is it moves the first line indent plus these two together. It maintains that distance. So it's really nice because the average or the standard separation between your bullet and your text is 0.25 inches for regular text. All right, so what if you want to change your bullet? What if you don't like the little dot? Okay, then you click this right here. You click this little drop down, and that's what a drop down is called. Notice all of these options, or most of them, have drop downs. And once you click that, you're going to get other options. So in this case, I'm going to get some of the options I've used in the past, which would be, and I have no idea why I thought a school bus would be a professional thing to put on a document. Evidently, at some point I did. And sometimes your bullets will just indiscriminately change to this bullet. So it's really nice to be able to know how to change them back. So this is the standard bullet. Now, if I'm ever going here, I'm usually going here to change it to something other than what I've used in the past. So I'm going to click on down here where it says Define New Bullet. And whenever you see dot, 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 that means that there is going to be an associated dialog box that's going to pop up. And so by clicking on that, I get this dialog box. And it's called the Define New Bullet. Very descriptive dialog box. And there's a lot of things I can do from here. There's all sorts of things I can change about the font. I can make it a picture bullet. Most people are going for symbol when they get here. And again, dot, 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 I'm going to get another dialog box. Now, this is one case of which one dialog box has a lot of different purposes. So in this purpose, I'm using the symbols dialog box for bullets. But I could also go to insert symbol, insert on the ribbon, and then I could go to symbol, and I could just put these in as a character. But I can also use them as a bullet. Now, there are literally thousands of options here, and it's fun to go crazy and try a whole bunch of different things. But remember, the standard bullet is always going to be that little dot. The really fun grouping of symbols to look at is something called wingdings and webdings. And if you click this drop down right here, you'll get that option of going to those two groupings or font categories. Once you've chosen your bullet, then you click OK, and now you're going to have that new bullet. That's the standard bullets. There are times when we want to actually use numbering bullets. Numbering bullets are exactly what they sound like. They're bullets that are sequential. They're numbered. So you would do the same thing. You would select the information you want to number, and then you would click on numbering. Now I'm going to zoom in to do that. Zoom in here, and this is the numbering bullets option. By clicking on that, you're going to get the default numbering scheme, which looks like this. And it's really nice because if I click here and add another item, it's going to reorder these, and I'll get 11. It works very, very well. But there are some options even within this. Sometimes we have a list and we decide, you know what, this list would be better broken up into two categories. So we might insert, in this case, some dates. Maybe I saw these birds on this date, and then September 2nd, I saw these birds. Well, it doesn't make sense for this to be the 5th, 6th, and 7th. I want to renumber this. There's certainly a couple different ways to do that, but one of the options you have is to go to that drop down right here. First off, you have to select, obviously, and then you go to this drop down right here. And once you click on that, you can change the way these bullets look, the way they're numbered. They could be alphabetic, numeric. You can have dashes or parentheses. But what I'm going to click on is set numbering value. This is really handy because once you do that, you can change the default number, which is 5, or what it's currently set at. And then you can say, I want that to start at 1, and click OK. And now it renumbers everything for you, which can be really handy. The last thing we're going to talk about before we take a short break for questions is sorting lists. Okay, sorting list is one of the options in the paragraph grouping. It's A to Z. Now, I'm going to give you a little cautionary tale on this. Sorting is awesome. It's very important, but always use the best tool for whatever you're doing. If the majority of what you're doing is, like, say, addresses, and you want to be able to sort it by last name and first name and city and say it for a mailing list or something like that, Word will work. There are some tools available, and it can work perfectly. However, it's not the best tool for the job. Excel would be better, and maybe even Access database would be even better than that. What you want to be careful of when you're sorting is that if you're sorting based on two criteria, let's say first name and last name, you don't want to lose the connection between someone's first name and last name. And that's very possible within Word. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a moment. So first off, you'd click on this A to Z once you've selected what you want to sort. So I'm going to select what I'm going to sort. I'll go to that A to Z. And once I click on that, I get these options. And I have sort by primary, secondary, tertiary, or third sort, whatever you want to call it. And I can say sort by text, sort by all sorts of different things. I'm just going to do a simple sort here. I'm going to say that I want to sort this as descending based on text. So notice that Common Nighthawk is number 10. If I click OK, Common Nighthawk is now the first one because it's reverse alphabetized, but also it renumbered for us. So just a quick and easy sort that's available very, very quickly. All right, we can pause for just a couple of questions. Glory, if we have any.
Yes. So Victoria was wondering, she said, my resume is just a little over 1 page. What is the smallest font I should use to get it onto 1 page, in your opinion?
So I usually say anywhere between 10 and 12 point, which doesn't give you a whole lot. But let's say you're at 11 point font. And you're just sending this out and you know, maybe you have a cover letter. Make sure you use the same font for your cover letter. That's what's called branding. You want them to look similarly. But that's where that 0.5 can come in. You know, that 0.5, if I go to 10.5, I'm not going all the way down to 10, but I'm kind of just giving myself that one extra line of availability. You can also do that through slightly adjusting your margins, which we'll be talking about in just a little bit. The other thing that most people don't know, you can change your font to accomplish that. If I have my information in Calibri, or let's say Tahoma, and I have an 11-point font, if I change that to Calibri 11-point font, it might fit because each font has its own points, which seems silly, but it does. So adjust within the sans serif fonts a little bit, and you might be able to find one that makes it fit. Now that's the way of, I guess, cheating the system a little bit. A better option is you've got tons of good stuff. Just leave the best stuff. You don't want to sacrifice what we call white space for getting one extra line on there. You want to make sure there's enough white space so that the eye can be drawn to bolded statements and headings and bullets without it looking too cramped. So there's a lot of options there, but usually there's a way to get one extra line. We can take one more, Gloria.
Okay, this one is kind of more of a housekeeping chat question, but it says, hi, I am still seeing only my name. I put it on the full view screen and not able to get back to the original setting.
I would be interested if anyone else is having the same issue with that. It might possibly be that they have a two-monitor setup and they're looking at it two different ways. Paul says hit escape.
Yeah.
that might help. You could try around. You can also log out and log back in, and that will probably help you clear out any settings. All right. Next, we're going to go to margins, which is kind of a segue from what we just, the last question. Margins are that white space all around your document. Okay? You want them there. You don't want your document crowded at the top or crowded at the side. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the Page Layout tab, and we're going to click on Margins. Now, whenever I go to margins, I'm never using one of the ones that are already here. One of the weird things in Word 2003, this was the default margins. One to the top and bottom and 1.25 on the inside and, well, on the right and left. So I guess it actually was right here because it says Office 2003 default. That looks really weird by today's standard. It looks like a huge amount of wasted white space. Remember, you don't want your document to look cramped, but you also don't want it to look like you don't have enough to say. So you want to use that one page. So I use 1 inch all the way around. But if I want to slightly adjust that, I go to Custom Margins, and this will bring me to the Margins tab on the Page Setup box, and I can change these from top, left, right, and I like to mirror them all the way around. So if I'm going to go to 0.9, I can do that, or I can go to 1.1 or whatever I need to do. Now this would be a case for getting that one extra line from second page onto your first page. Again, be careful with that. You don't want to mess around with it too much. One of the questions I get quite a bit is, what is gutter position? It doesn't even sound nice. Gutter position is right here. If you adjust your gutter position, what it's going to do is it's going to give you an amount of extra white space to accommodate potentially some stationery that has something printed on the left margin. So you don't want 1 inch of pre-printed stationery to make your document look like it's butting up right against some additional text. So what that'll do is it'll take out that pre-printed stationery, and then we'll start from that position and give you another inch of margin. Now that's not done a whole lot today. I used to work with places that had stationery like this. You don't see it as much anymore. So not something you're usually going to have to worry about. Okay, and then once you adjust them, you just click OK, and it's going to adjust for you. The next thing we're going to talk about is page orientation. Last week in the Excel class, I talked a little bit about this. It's not used as much in Word. If it is going to be used, it's almost going to be used within a section break, which we talk about next. But what it does is it takes your paper from something like this, if you can see on my camera here, to this. So it takes from 8.5 by 11 to 11 by 8.5. And how you do that is you just click on orientation and you choose landscape, and then it performs that for you. Now I'm going to click on my zoom on the bottom right here where it says 150%, and I'm going to shrink that so that we can see our whole document. And then you can see that the ruler itself has changed, because now it says 8.5 inches, or excuse me, 9 inches, but there's that inch margin on each side. And that's what that gray area is, by the way, is that margin. And then if I look at my vertical ruler, it goes from 1 to 7, 1 to 6.5, excuse me, in the white area, and then we have that extra inch on both sides, which will equal 8.5. Now, you only use this if you have to, but it can be very handy for expressing information that has maybe more width than it does depth or length. All right, one more on the paragraph, or excuse me, in this grouping here, and that's document size, or excuse me, the size of the paper you're going to use. In certain industries, like legal profession, you may change this, or let's say you work for the county and you look for land titles and that sort of thing. You may have to go to something called legal size paper, which is 8.5 by 14. It looks huge, by the way, and if you landscape it, it looks very, very wide. So that's on size, again, under page layout, page setup grouping, you click on size. That's 8.5 by 11 is the normal. If I go to 8.5 by 14, it's going to make a very large piece of paper on my ruler. Now, of course, you have to load this into your printer. Some more advanced printers have two trays. One would be for standard and one would be for legal. And there's even some that go up to like A3, which is 11.69 by 16.54. That's probably based on metric measurements, so it probably makes more sense in the metric. Those are for like posters or flyers you're going to send out. So that's an option there. All right, we're going to dive into columns here in just a moment, but want to take care of any other questions we may need to get to before we move on.
Art, I have a couple attendees who are saying that they can't see you. I can see you.
You can, as in me, as in the
actual video. Yep.
Video. Okay. Well, that's okay. You don't need to see me as long as you can see the page. Is everyone able?
Yes, it says they can hear you and they can see the docs.
Okay, that's all that's really necessary. In fact, I like it better that way. But yeah, my video here. I'll stop the video real quick, and I'll start it again. And that may or may not solve the problem, but we won't spend any more time on it. Okay, so columns. So columns are very easy to do, but they're harder to do right. If you've ever read a magazine, obviously you have. If you ever read a newspaper, you're going to see that columns are in use quite a bit. They're really handy for creating flyers and all sorts of different things. Now, these are what I used to call document formats, and they truly are document formats if you apply them. So if I were just to click on columns right here on the page layout tab and click on 2, it would turn my entire document, because a document is one section unless you define it otherwise or make it otherwise. So if I go to 2 columns, my entire document becomes 2 columns, and that never works, because you're always going to want at least a title section that goes across your entire page. So one of the easy options you have to do this is get everything together, write everything out, and then you select what you want to be in columns. So in this case, I want to have, just for demonstration purposes, I want to make this one paragraph appear in 2 columns while maintaining 1 column here and 1 column here. All I would do is I'd click on columns and then click on 2. And you know, it doesn't look great, but it does put it into 2 columns. Now I could apply a whole bunch of more formats here. I could potentially put this into justify alignment so that everything lined up nicely on both sides. There's a lot of things I could do with that. But what I want to demonstrate with this is what actually happened. The computer did some pretty cool things for us. It did what we call inserting continuous section breaks. And I'll show you how you can find out what that looks like. You click on the Home tab, and then you turn on this Show Hide. I use Show Hide all the time. It's in the top right of the paragraph grouping, and it'll kind of show you what's going on behind the scenes. So was it a tab? Was it an enter? Was it a space? Or did you insert a continuous section break? Now, the computer did this for me, but it still shows what it did. There's another one that exists right here. It doesn't show because there's not enough space. The way I know it's there is I went from 2 columns to 1 column, and the only way you can do that is inserting another break. So what I want to show you is how to do that manually. You may ask yourself, why would I want to do that manually when the computer can just do it for me? The reason is it gives you a whole nother level. This is kind of that next level of more like advanced intermediate skills, I would consider. Most people don't know how to do this because it's not obvious. So let's go back to the document we had, go back to the page layout tab. And what we would do here is we would put our insertion point at the beginning of where we want the break to occur. So right here at the end of other, I'm going to click, okay? And then I'm going to click on breaks. So within breaks, I have many options. And by the way, the most simple break is a page break, but we're going to go to continuous section break, and I'm going to click that. Now notice, because I don't have my show hide turned on, it doesn't show anything, but it's there. Now I'm going to click on the end right here, and I'm going to go back up to breaks, and I'm going to insert another section break, continuous section break, okay? Now what that looks like, again, is I have a section break up here, I have a section break here. Now this doesn't really do anything until I change the format. I can insert, I don't do this by the way, but I could insert section breaks all over my document, okay? I could insert them every paragraph if I wanted to. However, until I change something as far as a section format, and many of them are right here, it's not going to matter. But in this case, it doesn't do anything until I apply it. So I'm going to click in this paragraph, the paragraph in between, and I'm going to go to columns, and I'm going to go to 2. And see, it did it the hard way, I guess you would say, but that's the way you would do it yourself. And if you play around with it, there's so much you can do. And going back to those breaks, look at those breaks. Look at what's available there. You have the option of doing column breaks, next page breaks, even breaks, odd breaks. Page breaks alone are very handy. Keyboard shortcut for a page break is Control-Enter, and all that means is it would take this document right here, if I put a page break right here, and would move everything else to the next page. The reason we do this is because we want to not hit Enter about 20 times. If most people do that page break by clicking and then hitting a bunch of enters. The reason that's not a good thing is, one, it's a waste of time, and two, if someone were to have this read to them through a screen reader, it would say, design that complement each other, new line, new line, new line. It would say that 25 times until it got to the new page. And that would be very, very frustrating for someone trying to understand the text they are having read to them. All right. Kind of heady stuff. How do you get out of, I saw that one right off the bat. Okay, I did see one. Someone had asked, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gloria, because I just saw a snip of that. Someone said, how do you get out of a break? Is that the answer, the question?
Yes.
Okay. So an example I just gave you, I'm gonna put in I'm just hitting Control-Enter, and notice it took that information right from here, and it put it to the next page. Well, I could turn on my show hide, and I can see that there's a page break there. I don't have to turn on the show hide to do this, by the way, but I'm going to put it there. If I click here, and if you remember from a couple weeks ago, we said to delete one character to the left, we hit backspace. If I want to click and delete one character from the right, I hit delete. So I'm going to hit delete, and that's going to suck up that paragraph symbol, that enter. But now the page break is sitting right there. If I hit delete one more time, boom, that break is gone. So treat a page break as a non-printing character that can be deleted or backspaced out. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, and going along with that, Michelle was wondering, how do you know what break you want to use?
Oh, you really just need to play around with it. I'm going to give everyone, if you haven't already tried it, and I know many of you have, in fact, you probably have tried this previous to me even showing you could do it. The training I'm going to give you access to, or anyone has access to, I'm going to give you the link to, has a whole section on breaks. It's called the GCF Learn Free platform, and it'll have a whole section on breaks. But the easiest way to do this is, like I said before, if I put up a large document, and I'm going to say maybe I want 30 paragraphs with 4 sentences in each. And so now I'm going to get, well, I guess I should have, oh, there we go. So now I get several pages. I get 3 pages. So that's enough for me to get a couple odd pages, 1 even page. And now I can play around with it. Just try all sorts of different things. Put your insertion point at the end of a document, and then maybe insert a continuous section break, and then maybe try to make this page be portrait or landscape, and then go back to portrait, and then mess around with columns, and then put column breaks in. And by the way, if you put a column break at the end of your last column, it'll go to the first column of the next page. You're only going to know that by playing around with it, and that's why, again, not to toot my own horn, although I will, this here's a game changer. This little formula allows you to work with any amount of text to play around with those. All right, so let me go back to my document I was working on here. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is styles. And by the way, there'll be plenty of time, we're cooking right along here, plenty of time for additional questions, and we can even delve a little deeper than the stuff we've been talking about. But styles is something I think everyone should at least attempt to work with. You may not need it currently, but it's really nice to have in your back pocket when you do. I'll tell you a little story about when I at first started doing computer training. At that time, I was working on Word 2000, that dates me a little bit, and we had created this enormous manual. I mean, this was an 8-week Microsoft Word course, 5-week Excel course, 3-week PowerPoint course, 4-week Access course, all in this one huge manual. And we had this master table of contents in which we systematically went through everything and found out where the chapters were and the sections were and all these different things. And we put the page numbers on there, and it worked great. It was a really good resource for everybody. The problem is, if I add something between page 1 and page 2 of that manual, let's say some text or something, that changes the numbering sequence, my table of contents is no longer useful. It's outdated. This has been around a while, by the way. It was available when I did it the first time, wrong the first time. I'll never do it wrong again. And I'm going to show you how you can make the computer automatically do some really nice things for you. Many of you may have seen styles, many of you may have used styles in the past just to apply a bunch of formats, or maybe to remove the spacing issue that I talk about. That's not a good way to do it, by the way, because when you click on a style, what you're doing is applying a whole group of formats, okay? So by default, when you open up a Word document, you have the normal template that has a style to it. So you're going to have Calibri, 11-point font potentially, left align, dark text, 1-inch margins. All of those things are formats that are collected into, well, you can call a lot of different things, a template, or at least for the characters, a style. If I want to create an entirely new set of formats, I can do that myself and name a style, but we're going to be working with these ones right here, the predefined styles. So in order to do that, what you need to do is apply these to specific text like chapters or headings or whatever. So I'm going to select all 3 of the chapter headings. Once I've done that, I'm going to apply heading 1 on the styles grouping. Now this is right on the home tab, and I'm going to click on that, heading 1, and notice that the changes from black and 11-point font or 12-point font to Calibri light, light blue, 16-point font. Now that alone, you might say, well, that's pretty cool, but I really don't need the help. I guess I can make those 3 clicks myself. The reason this is important is Word recognizes styles, and it can track things that are similarly styled. So because these are all in heading 1, what I can do is I can go to my References tab, click on Table of Contents, and choose whatever style I want. Now, I could do this on a new page. I could have put a page break in. There's a lot of ways of making this more fancy. But if I click on Table of Contents, it automatically looked at every single heading, heading format, heading style. The heading and chapter, I know that's a little confusing. I probably should have put it a different way. But chapter 1, 2, and 3 were heading style, so it puts them in there. If I change this to be something else, it would have said, the first section or something. Now, that may seem silly. Say, well, great, I got a bunch of dots in there for free. And it put page 1, I'll only have a 1-page document. If this were a 50-page document, it would give me the exact numbers. And then when I change something in the middle, and this is where it really, really helps, I don't have to redo this. All I have to do is go up to the table of contents grouping on the References tab and click Update Table. It looks at the whole document again, renumbers everything perfectly for you, and there's no guesswork. I can't tell you how wonderful that is. This also works really well for document navigation. So maybe you have a presentation you're going to give, and it only has 3 pages. Well, a presentation pane or navigation page will look at headings also and allow you to jump back and forth in between your document. All right, any questions about styles or anything we've covered so far, Glory?
Yes. Actually, I've had a couple different questions. They're still a little confused on whether or not they're going to receive the presentation.
Yes.
So can you just go through that one more time?
Yeah, okay. In fact, someone had actually asked me if they could get the presentation ahead of time, and we don't do that for multiple reasons. Not that that's a bad question, it's a perfectly legitimate question. What happens after we get through with this is I download the recording, which takes a day because it has to be taken through the internet and basically worked through WebEx. I download it, I edit out any information that isn't needed, like the gap we had, and that takes a couple of days, and then everyone will receive a recording of it. They'll also receive all of the slides plus the notes. You can listen to everything I've said, but the general outline of what I said will be in the notes portion. So yes, everyone will receive that follow-up. And I'm done saying that you'll get it tomorrow because it's just not enough time for me to get it together tomorrow. I'll work on it over this weekend, and it should be out Monday morning, hopefully in the early morning for you. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it.
Great, Art. I do have one other question. Carrie is wondering, she said, I do not have the legal size option or offered.
So the first question I would have is, what version of Word are you working off of? And it might depend on that. You might be a web-based version you're on. Every document, everyone I've ever seen, and I've worked with every single version of Word since 2000. And by the way, 2000, there was a 2002 actually, but main releases 2000, 2003, 2007, 2010, 2013, 16, and 19. So that's 7 versions. Some things do change, but in most cases, you're going to see very similar options. And I have seen, just personally, it doesn't mean it's not on yours, that legal has been on every one of them.
We'll see if she responds.
Yeah, I can reach out to you. Oh, web version. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And thank you so much for bringing that up. On any web version of a document, you are opening that entire program within your browser when you're working on it. And that is awesome. It works really, really well. It's very handy. The problem is this is a huge program, so it's not going to load the entire program into your web browser. So even the free version of Word that you can access through your MSN or Outlook account, you're not going to have a lot of the options we're talking about today. Okay, you'll have a lot of the basic options I talked about 2 weeks ago, but you won't have everything I'm talking about today. All right.
She wrote in there too, I'm paying monthly for this service.
Yeah, yeah. It's just one of the options. Now, that does not mean that there isn't ways around that. I'd have to look into that particular version. It'll be in the chat. I'll take a look at it and see if I can come up with any information for you.
Thank you, Art.
Yep. All right, next we're going to talk about headers and footers. Okay, headers and footers are, again, huge time savers. I've done it the hard way. I started my career, again, dating myself, with a typewriter. And with a typewriter, you have to put the heading at the top of every page if you're going to write a book or write a short story or whatever. With the advent of word processors, no one ever has to do that again. So there's a couple of different ways to get into headers and footers. These are located at the top margin or the bottom margin, which would be the footer. You can just double click there. If you put your pointer here and you double click, whoops, I didn't actually click too much there. You'll notice that everything else turns light, and then you have a new space to work on up here, and it says header. Also, take a look at our ribbon. We have a new tab. We have a new tab called Header and Footer Tools Design tab. This is something called a contextual tab, and you'll see this when you work with pictures, when you work with tables, when you work with headers and footers. it's information so specific and there's so many options that by clicking in that area that it pertains to, it gives you all of them as a new tab. That does not mean that when you're working in headers and footers, you can't go back to home. You certainly could. Like maybe you want to change the font size. You can go back to home. It'll still be there because you're in the header. Now, this is the way you create them manually, and there's a lot of things you can do from here. We could spend an hour and a half very easily going through all the options you have on headers and footers. I want to show you the way you can do it kind of automatically. So we're going to get out of this and go back to our page here. We're going to go to Insert tab. Headers and footers, when it was the old menu structure of Word in 2003 and earlier, used to be under View. It makes more sense. It always made more sense for me them to be under Insert. So Insert tab, header and footer grouping. I'm going to click on header. And from here you have all sorts of kind of predefined samples of things you can do. You certainly don't have to use these, but it gives you a starting point. So I could click on 3-column header. And from here, what it does is it actually manually inserts some custom tabs for you. And you can type, you can insert potentially your page number here, the date here, and the same text you want to show up on every page. Whenever you insert something like a page number, it's going to adjust based on the number you're on. So if I have a 100-page document and insert page number, every page will have a different number on it. That's the whole purpose of a header and footer is to save you time. There are times when you want to have a different first page, and that would be like a title page. And so it really does there, if you click on this different first page, it puts a section break at the bottom of that first page so that the numbering starts on page 2. And there's times when you want to have a different and odd and even pages. And you might put the chapter on the even page. You might put the book title on the odd page. Now, most of us don't deal with these large of documents on a consistent basis, but it's not that hard to work with. And there's a whole section on GCF Learn Free that I'll be sending you the link to that deals with headers and footers. Again, a really good option to use that equals rand formula I gave you so that you can truly see what headers and footers do. All right, any questions on headers and footers before we move on to cut, copy, and paste?
No, I think you've covered it, Art.
Perfect. I would say if there's no questions, then I did it exactly the way I should have. Either that or I so thoroughly confused you, you can't think of a question to ask. I'll go with the first one. All right, so cut, copy, and paste. Many of you have used this in the past, but I do want to give you some additional options here. First, I want to define the difference between cut, copy, and paste, and then I want to show you the easiest methods to do it with. I've already pre-selected some text. I've already turned it red, and the reason I turned it red is so that you can follow where it goes without having to remember the actual text. So I've got this red text in the first paragraph. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this grouping right here called the clipboard grouping on the Home tab. I'm going to zoom in on that, and I'm going to click on Cut. There is no such thing as cut, copy, and paste. There's only cut and paste or copy and paste, but we always hear it as cut, copy, and paste. So I'm going to click on Cut, little pair of scissors there, and it disappears. That information now goes to a virtual memory location on our computer called the clipboard. Think about someone carrying around a clipboard with them, and they take that information, remove it from wherever it was, and puts it on that clipboard. Now they can drag that wherever they want. It doesn't just have to be in this document. It can be on another document. It could be on an email or into an Excel document or into a PowerPoint. Sometimes, if you try copying from one program to another, it doesn't allow you to initially, and the reason is you didn't have that program opened when you copied the original information. So the source document was open, obviously, because that's where you got it, but you didn't have the destination document open when you had copied it. So in that case, no big deal. Just go back to the source document, recopy or recut it, and then go back and you should have the option of pasting that information. So to paste something, you just define a new place where you want it to go. So I'm going to click right at the beginning of when here, and then I'm going to click on the icon for paste. Not the drop down, I'm going to click on the icon. And what that'll do is it'll insert that information where I wanted it to go. To me, this is what won me over from a typewriter to a computer. You can't do this on a typewriter. It's so powerful, and it's something I use every day, multiple times a day. The next option is copying. Same thing. You select the information, you go up here to copy, and this time it's still there because I just took a copy of it and put it on my clipboard. It's still in the same location. Now again, I changed my insertion point. I'm going to put it at the beginning of 4 here. Now I'm going to click on the icon for paste, and now I have 2 copies of that. Some people have a really hard time finding out or figuring out why you would use cut or why you would use copy. I've had people ask me on both sides of it. There's reasons to use one or the other, and they become very obvious the more you use the program. Copy, generally you want to take something from the one document and move it to another, or maybe it's the same answer to 2 different questions and you didn't want to retype it. There's a lot of reasons to use copy. One of the questions I get a lot is when I copy and paste something, I end up getting an extra line. Okay, has anyone ever had that happen? So what I mean is, what I might have happen is I go here, and I copy this. Well, here, I'm going to do this first. I'm going to put this in here. I copy this and go Control. I'm trying to do this at least. There's just a little bit of lag in between when I copy and paste here. Okay, I'm going to copy this. Now I'm going to paste this. And sometimes we'll get an extra line that shows up here in between. The easiest way I can demonstrate this is if I take the same thing, and I'll say bird, and I select bird. Again, it's very hard. I'm going to copy that. Now, sometimes when you paste, it'll show up on the same line. Most of the time, when you do that, and I'm doing the same exact thing I just did, it'll show up on different lines. Here's why. Be aware that when you copy and paste, you're also copying and pasting whatever extra non-printing characters that you selected. So there's a difference between selecting bird and selecting bird space enter. Okay? You don't see it, but notice there's that little bit of extra selection. And when I do that, it goes on to different lines because it says enter is new line. If instead, I just select bird without selecting that extra character, it goes on the same line. Don't know if anyone actually had a question about that, but I've gotten a lot in the classes I've taught, so I thought I'd quickly mention it. All right. So a couple other things with cut, copy, and paste. There are multiple ways of doing it, and you use whatever works well for you. I'm going to show this in a live demonstration again. I just showed you what I call the ribbon method or the toolbar method, which is using those icons. One of the things you'll find out very quickly is you're not always going to have those icons, depending on where you are. Cut, copy, and paste is not a Microsoft Word specific option. This is a Windows option. It's available to you wherever you go on your computer. You can take an entire folder and do this. You can take an Excel document and put it into a folder on a network drive and do it. I mean, the opportunities to use cut, copy, and paste are just about endless. So just use whatever method is available or what works best. So one option, turning this red, is the toolbar option, which I just gave you. Another option would be the keyboard shortcut option. And if you look in the bottom of your keyboard, X, C, and V are right next to each other, or right above your space bar. Those are the keyboard shortcuts for cut, copy, and paste. By that, I mean by hitting Control X, you cut, Control C, you copy, Control V, you paste. If you ever need to remember that, just hover over any one of these options, and it'll tell you right on your screen what the keyboard shortcut is for that option. That's all I ever use, by the way. I always use keyboard shortcuts for most of what I do, and the reason is it's just faster. Okay, so I have one hand on the mouse, I cut it, I change my insertion point, and I paste it. Then I don't have to do that mouse travel up and down. Whatever works for you. Another option a lot of people like to use is the right-click option. You select information, You right-click within that information, and you have these options. So I could cut that, and then I could right-click here, and I could paste it. Okay. Another option is really handy. You select something, you can drag and drop it. So I've selected this information. Now I just click within it, and I drag it to a new location, and I basically cut and paste that information to a new location. So there's all sorts of them. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with these, just that you will find situations in which only the keyboard shortcut option is available. Google Docs is a great example for this. If I want to take something from a certain part of Google Docs and move it to someplace else, I can only use the keyboard shortcut option. All right. The only other thing I want to talk about with cut, copy, and paste is the other options for paste. And Gloria, do you have a quick question there? So you jumped on with the camera.
Yes, no, I actually do have a question. Lisa was wondering, how do I start numbering the page number on a different page, such as after the table of contents? I need the exact process.
Okay, well, all right, challenge accepted. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a large document. Okay. And it takes a while for the computer to catch up with this. So not right off the bat will it say page 1 of 17, but now it does. Okay, so if I wanted this to, if I wanted to put a header here, and let's say I did, and I'm going to say this is MS Word, and then I'm going to, at the beginning here, I'm going to, again, go to my design grouping right here, if I can get my design grouping. I can say different first page right here. And what it does basically is it wipes out the first page heading. If I go on the second page, there's MS Word. So this would be where I could insert the page number and say right there. Okay, so that is page 2, and page 1 doesn't show anything. So we already ran into an issue. It did half of what you wanted. And I'll just call this first page, but not everything you wanted. So in this case, what I'd have to do is I would have to select that page number, and I'd have to format page numbers. And this is very similar to the numbering situation we were in before. And I can say start at 1 here. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to change. Oh, here we go. So I can, there's a lot of different ways to do this, by the way, and I'm not saying this is even the perfect way to do it, but what I could do is cheat a little bit. Say start at 0. What that's going to do now is this now becomes page 1. There are other options of doing this, but that will solve it very quickly. Play around with this. There's so much in here. There's so much you can mess around with, even within just this one menu option. There's all sorts of things you can do to continue from a previous section. So like if you had some information in the middle of a document, maybe it was just some, there were some things where you wanted to stop your numbering. Now you want to give 5 pages of related information, and then you wanted to go to a new section. You could continue it from previous section. Of course, that would involve putting some page breaks or some continuous section breaks. Okay.
All right. This next question is right along with that, so I think I'd like to ask you this now. Michelle was wondering, when you are in footers and you have a different first and now your page numbers are off because there are different section breaks, how do you change that so that the page numbers are correct? And can you clear the formatting in a footer?
Yeah, so the footer, headers and footers here, there's all sorts of different options you have, and what's happening here, I apologize, but my WebEx stuff is right in the way of what you're seeing there. So there's this different first page heading, which you could have a different first page, which you can do. Usually headers and footers are together, but what you can do is you can cheat a little bit. If you have a different first page and you decide that, hey, I want the footer to basically be in line with everything, but I want the header to be different, then basically you treat the first page footer as its own document and you just mimic what the rest of it would look like. So in this case, I could say this is page 0 or whatever. And I'm going to manually type that in. I'm not saying that's the most eloquent way of doing it, but just because you have a blank spot in your first page doesn't mean you can't put something in that footer section that looks similar to the rest of it. Now, yes, you would have to manually enter that. So you're entering your footer twice, but in a 100-page document, that's still just twice. All right. Well, the thing I wanted to talk about with cut, copy, and paste additionally is the additional options with paste. So has anyone, just in the chat box, I want to ask this, has anyone ever been in a situation where they copy a bunch of information off the internet, let's say a news story or a recipe, this is a great example, a recipe, and you paste it onto the internet, or from the internet onto your document, and it has a whole bunch of hyperlinks and pictures and all sorts of different things? Just yes or no. Has that ever happened to anybody, or am I the only one? Yes. Okay, at least one person said yes. Yes, yes. Okay, good. All right. Awesome. I feel vindicated because I struggled with this for years. And I found all sorts of different options for it. I'm going to maybe be able to do it for you live here. Let's see. So I'm going to go to 27 baked chicken recipes. Here we go. Perfect. Oh, awesome. This is going to do exactly what I want. So I know you can't see this, but I'm copying some information off of a recipe page, and I'm pasting it into my document. And you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3 different, who knows where they bring me, hyperlinks that could bring me to a virus, could bring me to an unsavory site, could install something on my computer, and I just want to get rid of them. Well, after years of looking, I found out that the keyboard shortcut for that is Control plus Shift plus F9, which don't even try to remember because I'm going to show you an easier way. But for years, that's the only way I could do it, other than doing a multi-step process through Notepad and all sorts of different things. None of us have to worry about that anymore. All we have to do is, when we paste, you can either do this through right-clicking or through your drop-down. When you paste, there are 3 options. You have the paste option of Keep Source Formatting, of Merge Formatting, and Keep Text Only. If you use Keep Text Only, what it's going to do is strip out all pictures, all hyperlinks, and you don't have to worry about it. It's awesome. It also helps from, by the way, if you've been someone like me who's tried to print something directly off the internet, you always get 5 more pages than you intended. It's a really good idea to copy and paste things from the internet to a Word document so that you can take out that extra stuff. You can delete those pictures and those ads and all that kind of stuff. But this will save you most of that trouble. Again, I'm going to show that to you. All you're doing is once you've copied that information, you're right-clicking, and you're choosing the option of Keep Text Only. Okay? If nothing else, I hope that was worth your while for coming today. All right. We'll get into some of the training resources I mentioned, and then we'll talk about some assessments, and then we'll open the floor for any last-minute questions. So, next thing is, and this is a repeat from last time if you were here, GCF Learn Free, I will shout this from the treetops, is your best option for free training that's available, especially for Microsoft Word. I had mentioned Coursera, the free courses available to all Minnesotans till the end of the year. I have a lot of Excel courses there. Doesn't have very much in the way of Word. Microsoft Word is just a very commonly used program that very few people have systematic training to. They haven't gone through a process. So you just go to Google, you type in GCF Word, whatever version you have, and then you click on this first link, and it's going to bring you to 30 different options, 30 different lessons. And even though you might have perfectly understood everything I talked about 2 weeks ago or today, don't skip anything. Go through the whole thing. This is lesson 1 through 4. Here's lessons 28 through 30. I'm not going to cover everything of these 30 lessons in the 3 lessons I do, but we will end with mail merge in 2 weeks. The reason I like mail merge is it's the top of what most employers expect for someone who says they are proficient in Word. I did a survey of hundreds of employers many years ago, and yeah, I got a lot of different answers, but the overriding answer when I said, how much do you expect someone to know in Microsoft Word? Not that they were expecting it, but they were saying, boy, we'd really like them to be able to at least do mail merge. And that presupposes a lot of other things: headers, footers, cut, copy, and paste, columns, a whole bunch of different things. So if you can get to this point, you've got most of what an employer could reasonably expect of you. So we'll go through that next week. Another thing you can do is you can take an assessment on this, and this particular assessment is the North Star Digital Literacy Assessment. If you just go to the link I'll be sending everybody, you can take a test on Microsoft Office 2016. It'll work for every single version that in the last 10 years it's very similar, and it'll tell you whether you have the general skills or you don't. Don't be worried about if you miss a question that you said, I know I answered that right. It's very hard to implement a test like this online through a Flash media player or whatever. It works very well, but it's not going to work perfectly. So they're looking for a specific way of answering it. So if I use one of my fancy keyboard shortcuts to answer something they were wanting me to click on, they're not going to give me credit for it. So no big deal. You'll get the general idea. All right. So at this time, we're going to pause and just kind of open the floor for any additional questions you may have. And I'll do my best, by the way.
So here's a good question, Art. It says, how do you convert from Roman numerals to numbers? For example, table of contents is numbered as Roman numerals and the body is numbers.
Yep. So you do it very similarly. Let me see if I can, I don't know if I can get this up there quick enough. Oh, chapter 1 and chapter 2, chapter 3. Okay. So I'm going to make these all headings. And first off, I'm trying to show two things here. First off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that information, I'm going to go to references, and I'm going to create a table of contents like I did before. Okay. So unfortunately, I had my insertion point in the wrong area. So let's click back up here. And I'm going to do that table of contents again. Okay. Now, because I had numbered this one 0 from last time, that's why you see it. Watch what happens when I put in a few page breaks here. And get back to the beginning. Now, already it knows I want to update this table. So chapter 1 is on page 1, chapter 2 is on page 2, chapter 3 is on page 3. They still show wrong. So I'm going to click on Update Table, and Update Table Numbers Only. Automatically fixed for me. Okay. Now, what if you want to change these to Roman numerals or whatever? Then you would go to Table of Contents, and then there are Custom Table of Contents. And from here, you can change all sorts of different things. Modify, change the index, and you just have to kind of play around with this. I'd have to. Honestly, I haven't done it in a while, so that's kind of where you would look around. But notice there's all sorts of different things here. If you've ever had to do a college paper with a bibliography, citations, there's all sorts of different things. You cross-referencing, insert captions. There's so much you can situationally do within this. It's absolutely unbelievable what's available there. All right. Oh, and then more tables. And if the type of table you want is not available, if you just go to one of these, it's going to switch it to numbers, by the way, if it happens to be in Roman numerals in your table of contents. Usually that's an index, though. Indexes are more normally in Roman numerals. So, any more questions?
Yes. Art, could you just explain to everyone, you had mentioned Coursera a little bit, and how they can avoid having to pay for any classes?
Yeah, thank you. So Coursera had a partnership with CareerForce. And if I go to this particular web page, I got to get off my chicken recipe web page I had up. It's this one right here. And I'll be sending everyone this. If you haven't already registered, please do. It is absolutely free, but Coursera itself is a for-profit model. I mean, if you just go to Coursera and try to register, they'll say, great, pay us some money. Otherwise, they won't be able to do what they do. We entered into a partnership with them, and so if you register for an account here, and it's really simple to do that, you just go to Request Coursera Access, you enter your very simple information, and then you'll get an email that you will verify. So Just registering doesn't mean you can go in and start. You got to get that email from us. So whatever email you put in, check that, and within a day, you should be able to create your own account. From there, there's like over 4,000 different options, 4,000 different trainings, and there's over a dozen on Excel itself. But I mean, there's programming options, there's well-being options. I'm taking a course right now on Python programming while taking a course on accessible educational opportunity manuals, or creating accessible educational opportunities. So there's pretty much anything there you can think of. And it can be a little overwhelming, but the first step is registering for an account. Now, you can register for an account up until, it says right here, December 31st. You'll have access to the platform through March 2021, but you'll have to start any course February 28th. So that gives you a day. Some of these are 2-hour courses, some are 12-week courses, so please don't do that. I don't know what will happen if you are in the middle of a course and it times out, so don't put yourself in that situation, especially if it's a certificate type of course in which you want to get some verification. You never want to be stuck on the outside having to pay for something you thought was free. Okay. All right. Any
Excellent.
other questions?
Just one more.
Okay, at the time.
Yes, somebody's wondering, why would you even want to change the margins?
Multiple reasons. There are times where, like I was talking about, where you want something to fit. Sometimes you want to change the margins because it's the brand or the writing, what do they call it? The style of your organization. Some organizations require a certain style of everything. It's a template, basically. There are times where maybe you have, like I said, that gutter position in which you have stationery that requires something. Some people like to have enough room to write notes in the margin, so they have an outline and they want the side. I like the spirit of the question. I don't want to change margins either. I want 1 inch all the way around. I think that looks the best, and you should stick with that. However, there are situational reasons to change it. Just be very careful in doing that. You don't want to have margins like this. Because 1, it won't print, and 2, it's very hard to read. Okay, so don't go to those narrow margins because employers don't like that for a resume.
Excellent. You know, I do have one more question I want to throw out there real quick, because I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to have you answer it.
Okay.
It is, do you think there will be an extension of Coursera after December 31st?
You know, the more people who ask, the more feedback I can give to the powers that be and hopefully request it. There's no guarantee, so I don't know. I think it's been a tremendous opportunity that's been well utilized by job seekers in Minnesota. Oh, and I do have actually one more thing to show you. So I think it would be, if someone is going to want to ask that question, I'll keep a tally, basically, and I will ask, but there's no guarantees. No one asked this, and I was surprised, maybe because you knew it. I had selected non-contiguous text, meaning that I had selected text that exists not together, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this and paste it a few times. When you want to select things, like maybe you want to format a bunch of these things, that's not easy to do unless you do something very specific, and that's hold the control key down. Holding the control key down can sometimes give you options to select non-touching text. Now in this situation, if I wanted to select this text, just this column of text, it's not a column, these are tabbed columns, so it doesn't allow me to do it. The other option you have is the Alt key. And with the Alt key, holding the Alt key down, you can select non-contiguous text and columns. I recommend playing around with that. It's something you put in your toolbox, and when you find a situation like maybe your dates on your resume in which you want to take the bold off, it's really helpful because instead of having to select each and every line and applying the format, you can just select the entire thing at the same time and apply a format. So, all right, it's at 2:29. I hate to say this because I said it last week. Thank you for your patience in allowing me to get back online and hanging out with us while we were able to do that. Next week is Intermediate Excel. The week after will be Advanced Word. And the week after that, we'll wrap up this 6-week series with the end-all be-all, which is Excel Advanced. I hope you're enjoying these sessions, and if we get the feedback, we'll give more. But this is our first go around with this, so it's been a learning experience, and thank you for taking this journey with us. Thank you, Glory, for doing the chat box. And
Yes.
see many of you next week. Have a great day,
everyone.